Good morning, all. Thanks for yesterday and some nice comments, and I'm glad some of you find it engaging. Um, so there's some good points made yesterday. I'm going to start with the fact that Patrick raised the point about some artists not explaining their work, or and also whether you need to. Um, I think there's an understanding that all artists, they has the wide range of sensibilities, focus, different areas of interest, and different approaches, as with any other sphere. So you're going to get those that are gregarious and outgoing, and then you're going to get those that are introverted and sensitive. But I also think the hostile environment doesn't help. It doesn't, to be open and honest, and whether that's because you're up against a commercial system that wants you to sell it, or because you're in an academic system that wants it to be verifiable in some form and it's scrutinized heavily. Um, the environment doesn't encourage that sort of open discussion and to be honest about it. Um, and certainly the public, if you start to try and explain peculiar behavior, you're going to feel very vulnerable if you're in an isolated studio somewhere. And it's hard to bridge that gap from something that's in your head and your heart to going, I'm going to now explain that to the world. Um, I think sometimes Richard Feynman, the physicist, once, when asked to explain quantum physics, um, oh, I've got a phone call from Jim. I'm going to decline you now, Jim. Um, he was sort of asked by a reporter to explain quantum physics, and Richard Feynman sort of asked him, he said, "Do you know advanced mathematics?" And the guy went, "No." And he said, "Well, in that case, you're never going to be able to understand it. You've got to understand advanced mathematics." Now, it's comparable in the fact that unless you've been studying it, unless you are absorbed in it, it's quite a long way to go. And again, Patrick raised this point about the fact that every specialism has this difficulty of connecting to a wider appreciation. If you are in forestry, as he was, um, those specialisms are very difficult to communicate and to get appreciated, particularly when it requires such focus. Um, but that is the challenge, and that's why I'm saying that challenge isn't unique to art. But my interest is promoting that, and so that's what I'm doing. And I think, with regard to saying I know what I like, and music doesn't need explaining. Well, I was confronted with that very fact when I did the exhibition at Stourhead with the National Trust. It was a national conference. This is for Beauty and the Beast. It was a national conference for the heads of all of their properties. And I got heckled at this event for introducing contemporary art and wanting to explain it, you know, explain it as best I could, knowing that it was going to be an antagonistic audience, and generally the whole thing from start to finish. Um, and I was heckled for the fact that somebody shouted at me saying, good art doesn't need explaining. And I had to point out to this gentleman that we have just spent, the speaker prior to me had spent 20 minutes discussing how to interpret Hardy's Cottage in order that the public would appreciate why the National Trust had bought this thing, or was involved in trying to restore it. And so that to them was completely acceptable. We're going to spend all of this time and money on trying to sell effectively and engage people with this idea because they wouldn't appreciate it otherwise. And yet, as far as contemporary art goes, oh, of course, that doesn't need conversation. That doesn't need thinking about it. You've just got to understand it. You'll feel it in your gut. And I think that again uh, points out the different areas of activity, because it's the same with music. Not all music you get straight away. There's the pop world, and you pick up a beat and a tune, and it's meant to catch you, and it's got a lick. But some other works, they're going to be difficult. And if you want to sort of really appreciate some of the genius of it, the chord sequences or the slight changes in timing or the nuances of the production, and even the same is true with people like the Sex Pistols. If you listen to the sound engineer talking about the producer talking about how they mixed it, there was a lot of thought and effort that went into getting that down, or never mind the bollocks. Um, and that then gives you a different appreciation. So some of it's attitude and smoke and mirrors. Um, and also, I think there's a program on at the moment, which I haven't managed to catch all of it yet, about, uh, sort of difficult art or the grotesque art. And it reminded me of the Chapman brothers because, you know, I couldn't do what they do in so much that I wouldn't want to spend my time dealing with that stuff. But I appreciate them for doing it. And I remember them sort of talking about a Russian film that was gory and showed the horrors of war when the Germans went into Russia. And it was, that stunning insight. And I wouldn't be without that insight unless they had that interest and that personality to take it on. I can't live in the dark world like they do, but I value them for doing it. And I think this comes back to the fact that I know what I like. Well, I think that's a ludicrous thing. Again, it sort of it assumes that there's a sort of I don't want it questioned, and so therefore I don't want the world to change, and I'm not prepared to consider. And that is a big factor. People are frightened of the change. Um, so I mean, there's a number of points that were raised with Andrew. Andrew, you spoke about Damien Hirst and the art world. Well, I haven't read the articles about the guy claiming that he was plagiarized or stolen by Damien Hirst. So I don't know whether there was engagement or he looked at it or whatever. But again, this issue of originality and inspiration is lifelong. That's a really difficult thing. I went to an event where an artist was claiming that somebody had stolen their work because they were drawing skulls. Well, skulls were around way before these folk and were in art and drawn for ages. So the nuances of that are difficult. And that same problem occurs whether you're a coder, you're a computer coder or not, whether you're a chef making recipes. That is difficult, and so protecting your ideas is another part of the problem. Um, and as if you have an issue with Damien Hirst, well, I think you know there's different reasons to have issues with him, but to be because he is who he is and big and successful, I think that's problematic. Um, I don't particularly have an issue with that. Um, and as far as the art business, I mean, taking on the art business as a corrupt organisation, well, and its monstrous sort of manipulations and its controls, and again, that's part of the art world, part of the world, and but it shouldn't affect us. That shouldn't affect how you go about your work and the scrutiny of and the dedication and the application you put into your own work. And there are different levels of this, and if you're not in it, why worry about it? In some, unless you have aspiration to be there, in which case you've got some big strides to take. Okay. Um, there's so much coming out of art. Richard raised this thing about art education. I'm delighted that he went somewhere, obviously, where he was encouraged by what he saw. Um, Most of the stuff I've seen recently is pretty much echo chamber stuff, where they're sort of being self-referential and wanting to sort of be empirical in a sort of to justify their existence in the same way, incomparable to science, which I think is a mistake in many ways. So thank you to Jess, Patrick, Andrew, um, Anna, and Angela, thank you for your sweet and kind words, and we'll do another one of these, I'm sure. Um, there's a lot to unravel, really, and these short little bursts um, might give you some thought. But again, thank you for bearing with me.